Bream.
Thank you very much, Laura. Here is what's coming up tonight.
New allegations of sexual misconduct rattle Washington power brokers. CBS News heavyweight Charlie Rose, New York Times reporter Glenn Thrush, and now a second woman is accusing Democrat Senator Al Franken of inappropriate conduct. How will Washington elites respond to the new charges against these favorite sons of the establishment? Steyerwalt is on the case. Is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on the same page as the president when it comes to North Korea, or not?
There's no confusion.
Ambassador John Bolton on whether Obama holdovers at the State Department are interfering with Trump foreign policy. From Otto Warmbier to UCLA basketball players, the Trump administration is bringing Americans home from dangerous places, raising questions about whether the Obama administration could have done more to help Americans in distress.
I think the results speak for themselves.
Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Tonight, two more well-known media figures have been accused of sexual misconduct, while a second accuser has come forward to share her story about Democrat Senator Al Franken. As for CBS and PBS anchor Charlie Rose, the Washington Post citing 8 women who detailed years of sexual harassment by the newsman. Lurid details from unwanted sexual advances, walking around them while he was nude, lewd phone calls, and groping their bodies. Also today, New York Times White House correspondent Glenn Thrush accused by women at publications like Politico and Vox of kissing and touching them without their consent. Allegations Thrush has disputed. Meanwhile, a woman in Minnesota describing in more detail an encounter she had with Al Franken in 2010 after he'd been elected to the Senate. She says he touched her inappropriately, and she believes there are many more Franken victims who have yet to come forward. CBS, PBS, and Bloomberg moved quickly to suspend Rose in a statement, Rose admitting he behaved insensitively, in his words, and apologizing for his actions. The New York Times also suspending Thrush, saying all accusations of sexual harassment have to be treated seriously. But from Capitol Hill, muted reaction to the new allegations against Senator Franken. The Democrat responding, quote, that he feels badly that she came away feeling disrespected. Sarah Westwood, the White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner, joins us now. Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, good evening.
All right, I want to read a little bit more of what we have from Charlie Rose. Let's start there. The newest allegations detailing the years and many women saying there were various uncomfortable situations, touching and all kinds of things. He says this: it is essential that these women know I hear them and that I deeply apologize for my inappropriate behavior. I am greatly embarrassed. I've behaved insensitively at times, and I accept responsibility for that, though I do not believe that all of these allegations are accurate. I always felt that I was pursuing shared feelings, even though I now realize I was mistaken. Do you think that'll be good enough for the folks who now are, he's suspended essentially?
Right. I think a lot of these apologies are starting to run together. They all sort of have the same elements. There's an apology in there somewhere. There's an acknowledgement that in the past they've committed mistakes. And then there's this sort of defensive crouch where they say that they don't remember the incident the same way that the women do, that they don't believe that every allegation is credible. Harvey Weinstein, for instance, still insists that none of his encounters were not consensual. Glenn Thrush says he doesn't remember some of the incidents the same way as the women. That's exactly what Al Franken has come out and said. He doesn't recall the instances the same way as his accusers. So all of these apologies are starting to sound the same, and in many cases they're not enough to stop men from facing these consequences.
Yeah, and you mentioned Glenn Thrush, so I want to make sure this is in part what he said to the New York Times. He said, I apologize to any woman who felt uncomfortable in my presence and for any situation where I behaved inappropriately. Any behavior that makes a woman feel disrespected or uncomfortable is unacceptable. The New York Times has said that he's going to be seeking treatment. He's had trouble with drinking, which he's admitted. He's going to be seeking some outpatient help for that, although he says he's been sober since June of this year. But in all of these cases, in many of them, these young women were in their 20s. They talked about the fact that they felt powerless against these men who they thought had a lot of control over their careers, over their lives, essentially, and they felt they had nowhere to turn.
This is the exact kind of allegation that's causing Democrats to revisit what was wrong with the Bill Clinton era. It wasn't so much that he had so many accusers of sexual misconduct, but you see a lot of soul searching about how wrong it was for Bill Clinton at the time to use his power to pressure a younger, defenseless woman into a relationship, even though it was nominally consensual. And so this is the kind of conversation we're having all over the place, in Hollywood, in Washington, about when powerful men use their positions to get a woman into bed, essentially, that is wrong. That is a form of sexual harassment. And so that is sort of a new conversation that we're having as a society in the post-Weinstein era.
Yeah, and to be clear, some of the allegations against President Clinton include rape, include forcible sexual assault. And now we do have people coming forward and saying, Democrats saying, he probably should have resigned. We should have been tougher on him. Things are different now. But how convenient is it to make that statement when you know, they don't have anybody running for anything who would be impacted by this, essentially?
Right, and it's very interesting that the Al Franken accusations just happened to come to light at the same time that Democrats were having this national reckoning with the allegations against Bill Clinton, because there were lots of people in the chattering class on the left who were saying that if these sorts of allegations surfaced about a Democrat today, well, absolutely we would ask him or her to resign. And now they have a very clear opportunity to exercise that kind of moral authority, and yet we don't see it doing it so far. It's kind of cynical to say, but this sort of deferential reaction to the Al Franken allegations is kind of an unspoken recognition that he won't be the last politician in Washington to get accused, and maybe they don't want to send the lynch mob after him because this is going to happen to more politicians on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and to that point, there is an Ohio legislator, a state legislator, who has now since stepped down. He is a married man, married to a woman, and has now, he's facing scores of allegations that he pursued young men, that he harassed and stalked them. He stepped down, and this is what he had to say. I sincerely regret that my actions and choices have kept me from serving my constituents and our state in a way that reflects the best ideals of public service. For those whom I have let down, I'm sorry. He didn't stay and fight. He seemed to recognize his situation was overwhelming with a number of people that have come forward, and for him, he decided to back away.
He did, and I think that his was a particularly egregious case, but just the volume and the severity of these cases that are coming to light, it's breathtaking. Every day you hear new allegations against lawmakers. Just tonight we heard new allegations levied against a Democratic congressman from Michigan, and they come seemingly every single day. It is interesting to see which figures choose to stay and fight and which choose to resign. In these past few weeks, we've seen that people in the private sector, particularly in media, are very quick to step down. Very few have stayed and fought for their positions in public office, though. That's usually very different, as Al Franken is very illustrative of that. So it'll be interesting to see if more politicians are as quick to resign as folks in the private sector have been when these new allegations are coming to light.
And I think we all know this story is far from over on many fronts. All right, Sarah Westwood, thank you very much.
Thank you.
CBS, PBS, and the New York Times moving quickly to suspend Rose and Thrush, but an ethics probe on Senator Al Franken, even as the scandal deepens, that could take months, even years. So let's talk about it with Fox News politics editor Chris Steyer. Well, good to see you tonight.
What up?
Some really unpleasant stuff.
Yeah, it's gross.
We got to talk about it. But listen, the more immediate situation with private companies suspending these individuals, it's different than in the Senate, because now if they start this ethics thing, you and I have talked about the fact that it could be years before there are any findings.
Well, the last time there was something like this, Bob Packwood, Republican from Oregon, it went from 92 to 95 before finally he said, okay, mercy. But we would also remember, of course, there is a difference here. When Fox News fired Roger Ailes for his misconduct, they fired him. He didn't say, you know, I think I'm going to admit the gravity of my wrong. They cashiered him and he went away. When you have a sitting senator, there's nobody to fire the senator. Now, you can have 67 people in the Senate vote to remove him, but that's different than what happens in the private sector. I'm telling an employment attorney about this, but when you fire somebody like Ailes who did wrong, they can just fire him. You can't just remove a senator as easily.
And we think about 67 senators to expel somebody, and that's aside from what the Ethics Committee would do. How many of them are going to want to step up and say, oh, a couple of women have made allegations that seem to be credible. There's photographic proof with Leanne Tweeden and Franken. But how many of them are going to be willing to bounce someone, a colleague of theirs, on those allegations, knowing that there may be something in their closets as well?
Well, and you're already watching them do it over Roy Moore in Alabama and Franken, where the White House today sort of was playing a little tit for tat. Well, if Franken is still in office, why can't we support Roy Moore for Senate? And this is where you enter the bizarro world space where both sides say, well, even if it's true, they should be in the Senate because we need their votes. And people are intentionally surrendering moral authority, even the White House, because they want to have the vote and they want to play the political game. And by Franken being there, that gives Republicans an excuse to say, well, then more can come.
All right, so more on Franken. The Lindsay Menz, the woman who says at the state fair they had a picture. Her husband's taking the picture. Meanwhile, allegedly, she's saying that Franken is groping her.
Yes.
She says, Al Franken grabbed me while taking a photo together at the Minnesota State Fair. There have to be many others. Don't let this story fade. She's inviting others to come out of the woodwork. In the meantime, the senator says, I take thousands of photos at the state fair surrounded by hundreds of people, and I certainly don't remember taking this picture. I feel badly that Ms. Menz came away from our interaction feeling disrespected.
Let me make a prediction about Franken. I don't think he's going to make it for the ride. I don't think he's going to make it for the ride because I think that women in the Democratic Party, and you're hearing it more and more clearly, which is if we want moral authority on this issue, we have to say that what Al Franken did, even if it was, even if he meant it as a terrible joke, even if he was being just a fool and not a creep, that in order to keep the moral authority on this, they're going to have to. There's a blood price to be paid here, and Franken is the guy. And of course, New York Post, somebody pulled up the pictures of him in a goof spread of photographs with Ariana Huffington, where he is playfully grabbing different lady parts and doing that stuff. So the Franken stuff's going to keep coming, and I just, whether it's right now or not, I don't know, but I don't think he's going to make it for the ride.
You mentioned, though, that there are those on both sides of this. We had a column last night, or last week, by a feminist who said, yeah, stuff that Franken's alleged to have done, and this is before the second one came forward, maybe bad stuff, but the ends kind of justifies the means in that. I know he's going to vote for women's rights. He's not a Republican. But now we're hearing from some people out of Alabama, Roy Moore will be a better vote on abortion and judges, so we have to vote for him on that. I mean, are both sides ceding some moral authority on those?
No, both sides are they're not just ceding it, they're shoveling it over their shoulder. They're running down the field. There's less moral authority, more crass politicization. But I will say this. If the Republicans, the worst case scenario for the Republicans might be if they get Roy Moore as a winner down in Alabama. Yeah, it's one vote less, but then, as I wrote today, they'll be running in 2018 manacled to the pistol-packing DA, Roy Moore, and he'll be with them. Democrats are going to make sure that Roy Moore is with every Republican who runs for Senate in 2018, no matter what.
That ethics committee is going to be real busy. With Senator Menendez as well. It'll give us plenty to talk about.
Yeah, that's why we got to stay up late.
That's your classic laugh. You should trademark that.
Yes,
maybe copyright it. All right, good to see you, Chris.
You bet.
All right, a woman who says Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore initiated sexual contact with her many years ago when she was 14 is speaking out and explaining her decision to now go public. Lee Korfman told the Today Show that Moore fondled her when she was in her early teens. She then explained how she told people close to her what had happened, even if she didn't go public until now.
I did tell people. My family knew, family friends knew, my friends knew. I spent a lot of time every time he came up railing against, him and what he had done to me when I was 14 years old.
Moore has denied all the accusations of sexual impropriety and is focusing his attacks on his Democratic opponent. Doug Jones says he's too liberal for Alabama. Over the weekend, the Young Republican Federation of Alabama suspended its support for Moore, explaining in a resolution they, quote, believe in innocence until proven guilty, but not necessarily electability until proven guilty. And our duty is not to the individual candidates, but to the longstanding growth and sustainability of the Republican Party. Well, the president was optimistic in his cabinet meeting about tax reform, but it's clear the hurdles are mounting. What is the latest on the plan at this critical stage? Is it in trouble or not? Fox News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now with the very latest. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening, Shannon. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he plans to take the bill to the Senate floor after Thanksgiving. The question is, can he find the votes to actually pass it? Republicans on the Senate Finance Committee passed their version of tax reform late last week. Every Democrat on the committee voted against it, and right now there are quite a few skeptical Republicans.
The biggest mistake was putting in a provision from the Affordable Care Act into the Senate bill that's not in the House bill, and I hope that will be dropped.
Collins' main concern is a provision that repeals Obamacare's individual mandate. It's a provision the Senate bill has. The version passed in the House did not touch it. The White House now seems unsure about keeping it.
If a good tax bill can pass with that Obamacare mandate repeal as part of it, great. If it needs to come out in order for that good tax bill to pass, we can live with that as well.
But that might be a deal breaker for Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. He called for an amendment to repeal the mandate before it was even in the plan. Others have concerns that are completely unrelated to health care. Senators Bob Corker, John Langford, and Jeff Flake say they're worried about the impact to the national debt. President Trump seems to think Flake is already a no vote after Flake was caught on a hot mic saying this.
Come the party of Roy Moore and Donald Trump. We are toast.
President Trump then tweeted this, quote, Senator Jeff Flakey, he'll be a no on tax cuts because his political career anyway is toast. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Senator John McCain of Arizona are question marks. They haven't said how they'll vote, but are considered to be wild cards by many. Republicans hold 52 seats in the Senate. Unless they convince a Democrat to support the bill, they can only afford to lose 2 Republican votes. And there's already one no, Wisconsin's Ron Johnson. He says he'll vote against the current Senate bill because he thinks it favors corporations over small pass-through businesses.
I wouldn't vote for it. It's just that simple, but doesn't mean I don't want to, vote for a real solution.
President Trump has repeatedly said he wants tax reform legislation on his desk by Christmas. Shannon?
Yeah, and that repeal of the individual mandate could be a real sticking point in getting this thing done. Ellison, thank you so much. Coming up, Bill Clinton faces 4 new accusers while he and Hillary face mounting calls for investigations into their dealings with Russia. The very latest developments ahead. Plus,
should have happened a long time ago, should have happened years ago.
Ambassador John Bolton says President Trump's diplomatic agenda may be getting thwarted by his own actions or lack thereof. The ambassador joins us live next. President Trump and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson naming North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism. President Trump arguing the Obama administration enabled Pyongyang's aggression, leading to the eventual death of American student Otto Warmbier and the assassination of leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother.
Today, the United States is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Should have happened a long time ago, should have happened years ago.
Critics denouncing the move as a needless provocation of the Hermit Kingdom. Some of those critics came from within the State Department, where there was apparently resistance to renaming North Korea a state sponsor of terror. Fox News contributor and former UN Ambassador John Bolton joins us live. Ambassador, good to have you with us tonight.
Glad to be with you.
What are these internal deliberations like? Because I know back in 2008, you didn't think they should come off the list.
Right. Look, in this instance, the State Department's kind of like a stuck record. They took North Korea off the list in 2008 to help induce North Korea to honor its commitments to denuclearize, commitments North Korea has made repeatedly over the past 25 years and repeatedly violated. So today, when somebody says, look, they were a terrorist state in 2008, they shouldn't have come off, we're going to put them back on for subsequent terrorist actions, the State Department can't handle it. And that's a real cultural problem, and it's not going to be solved simply by reorganization. I've said you need a cultural revolution at the State Department.
I want to play a little bit of what the Secretary of State had to say today about this decision.
It is very symbolic on the one hand because it just points out again what a rogue regime this is and how brutal this regime is and how little they care for the value of human life. The practical effects may be limited, but hopefully we're closing off a few loopholes with this.
Okay, so he referred to it as symbolic. He said the practical impact may be limited. So what are the practical impacts of putting someone back on this list?
Well, it does authorize additional sanctions, but I think it was a huge mistake for the Bush administration in 2008 to take them off as a political inducement for the nuclear negotiations. If this list is to mean anything, it means you have to be objective. If a state meets the qualifications to be a state sponsor of terrorism, you put it on the list whether you want to negotiate with them or not, and let their behavior change, not ours. So I think to say to the rest of the world, this is a terrorist regime, and therefore we don't believe them when they make commitments, as they've repeatedly demonstrated for 25 years, to denuclearize, because they're not going to do it.
Okay, so I know that you think that the president is missing an opportunity because a lot of the top positions at the State Department are not filled, and in many cases there's not even a nominee for these positions. We have some of these numbers. Our crack research team broke this down for us. 96, the number of unfilled positions. These are top positions. 73, there's not even a nominee. There's only 2 2 awaiting nomination and 21 awaiting confirmation. 1 has failed. We know that a lot of the people that are there then are still holdovers from the last administration. Here's what the president has said about the pressure to fill those positions.
Let me tell you, the one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters, because when it comes to it, that's what the policy is going to be.
All right, so how much does it matter that he get his senior position people filled?
Well, I think it matters a lot. Obviously, the president makes all the most serious decisions, but every day at the State Department and every other government department, dozens, hundreds of decisions are being made at lower levels that affect and constrain his options when big decisions finally get to him. Now, I just speak from all my years in the bureaucracy. If a president doesn't push his nominees down as far as he can to the assistant secretary level, the deputy assistant secretary level, it's very hard to get control of a large bureaucracy, especially one that's culturally hostile to a conservative Republican point of view. So there are maybe 200 or 300 significant political appointments at the State Department. The total staff of the State Department worldwide is 70,000. So you're not saving a lot of money by not putting these top people in, and what happens is their positions are filled on an acting basis by career people. And what have the career people been doing the last 8 years? Following Obama administration policies. That you don't have to believe in conspiracy theories, you just have to believe in human nature, that somebody's going to continue the policies they've been following until somebody else tells them to change.
And quickly, Secretary Tillerson has downplayed any talk of a rift between these two, or that they're not on the same page. What's your sense of the relationship?
Well, I think it's always difficult when you have people who come from very different backgrounds, neither one of whom has been in the government before. But I do think it's critical in the national security area that everybody speak with one voice, and that means the interagency process, a boring phrase, but a critical process, has to work. And I don't think it has worked as well as it needs to in a threatening environment such as we live in internationally today.
It is no joke on multiple fronts. Ambassador, great to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming in. All right, coming up, an NFL star sits for the U.S. anthem but stands for Mexico's. Well, that caught the attention of the tweeter-in-chief, and you can guess he was not happy. Meanwhile, the hunt continues for the killers of a Border Patrol agent. We've got the very latest on the investigation and unfolding political fallout next. LeVar Ball, LiAngelo Ball's dad, speaking out tonight about the back and forth with the White House over whether President Trump actually helped his son and 2 other UCLA basketball players get out of jail in China. Growing frustrated with the apparent lack of appreciation, President Trump tweeting he should have left all 3 players behind bars. I'm not sure he meant it. Trace Gallagher's live in Los Angeles with the very latest. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Shannon, even though the president said he should have left all 3 UCLA basketball players in jail in China, clearly he's angry with LiAngelo Ball's father, LeVar, who refused to thank the president. In response, Trump tweeted this, quoting, "Shoplifting is a very big deal in China, as it should be. 5 to 10 years in jail, but not to Father LeVar. Should have gotten his son out during my next trip to China instead." Now, if you don't know, LeVar Ball is well known for promoting his sons, his baller brand of apparel, and his Facebook reality show Ball in the Family. Tonight, during an interview with CNN's Chris Cuomo, Ball was asked repeatedly why he refused to thank the president. Watch.
I would say thank you if he would have put him on his plane and took him home. Then I would have said, thank you, Mr. Trump, for taking my boys out of China and bringing them back to the U.S. There's a lot of room on that plane.
Yeah, Mr. Ball also raised the ante by saying he's seen worse things than shoplifting and indicating he would have gotten the players out of China with or without the president. Legal experts say it's unlikely the players would have gotten significant jail time, but they could easily have spent months in China tied up in the court system, so maybe the president deserved to be thanked. But MSNBC's Morning Joe called the president's tweet battle with LeVar Ball racist. And when CNN correspondent Sarah Murray said, quoting, "He still doesn't seem to understand being president isn't about people lavishing you with praise and telling you how great you are." Former White House press secretary under George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer, fired back at Murray saying, quote, "Somehow I can't help but think if President Obama saved 3 people from prison in China and the father of one failed to thank him, the mainstream media would have defended O and blasted the dad. Mr. Trump is also waging a secondary battle against Oakland Raiders running back Marshawn Lynch, who before a game yesterday in Mexico City sat for the U.S. national anthem and stood for the Mexican anthem. President Trump said he should be suspended for the remainder of the season. The NFL said it had no comment on the president's comment, though the wife of the Raiders head coach said she now regrets voting for Mr. Trump. Shannon.
A lot of comments and no comments and more comments in there. Trace, thank you very much, keeping us up to date.
Sure.
We're getting word that a U.S. airman has died. Another is in the hospital after a training exercise in Texas. An Air Force official says their supersonic two-seater jet crashed just outside of Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. It happened this afternoon. No word yet on the cause. At this hour, authorities in West Texas are continuing to scour the area following the death of a Border Patrol agent and an attack that left a second agent also in critical condition. Correspondent Casey Stiegel has the latest from Dallas.
Federal law enforcement agents say they're currently working to piece together a timeline of events to gain a better understanding of what exactly happened in this rural Texas town over the weekend.
We lost a Border Patrol officer just yesterday, and another one was brutally beaten and badly hurt.
According to Customs and Border Protection, Agent Rogelio Martinez was out patrolling the Big Bend sector along the Texas-Mexico border. Officials say he was working alongside his partner when they responded to a call off Interstate 10 and somehow got into trouble. Moments later, one of the agents came over the scanner saying they'd been hurt and needed help. Both men were transported to an area hospital where Agent Martinez died from his injuries.
We talk about the wall, we're going to have the wall.
The recent violence prompted President Trump to once again tout why he thinks it's important to secure the U.S. border with Mexico. At today's White House cabinet meeting, the president talked about how his wall plan will help curtail violent crimes like this, among others.
We need it. That's rough territory. That's where the drugs are coming in. A lot of things are happening along the border, the southern border, and we're going to straighten it out.
The FBI has confirmed Agent Martinez and his partner did not come under fire, but would not elaborate on how the agents were attacked. Representatives with the National Border Patrol Council say rocks were used against the agents, but no federal sources will confirm that. Agent Martinez was 36 years old and had been a Border Patrol agent for about 4 years or so. According to Customs and Border Protection, 38 agents have been killed in the line of duty since 2003. Shannon?
Casey Stiegel with the latest. Thank you. Coming up, breaking developments in the Uranium One case and new revelations about what an FBI informant may know about how the Obama administration handled that nuclear deal, and it may not line up with what we've been hearing from the Justice Department. That's next. This is a Fox News alert. New report out from the Hill newspaper tonight that seems to contradict prior reports that an FBI informant cleared to testify to the Senate Intelligence Committee won't actually have a whole lot new to say. Well, according to what the Hill's gotten its hands on, they're reporting a short while ago, a review of 5,000 pages of documents show this, quote, the FBI informant gathered extensive evidence about a Russian plot to corner the American uranium market, ranging from corruption inside a U.S. nuclear transport company to Obama administration approvals that let Moscow buy and sell more atomic fuels. It all comes amid renewed pressure on the Justice Department to investigate the Clintons for their suspected role in a controversial deal for uranium. Here to tell us what the latest news means from their, we guess, differing points of view, former speechwriter for George W. Bush, Mark Thiessen, and former Director of Strategic Communications for Hillary Clinton, Adrian Elrod. Great to see both of you tonight.
Great to be with you.
Okay, so we've all tried to get quickly through this very lengthy article with The Hill, but essentially this informant, who's now free to speak publicly, says, I was alerting the FBI years before the deal was done that there was potential criminal activity, and yet it was passed anyway. What does that say to you, Adrian?
Well, what it says to me is, two things. Number one, Secretary Clinton had absolutely nothing to do with the approval of this sale.
Mark's already laughing. You can't even get through your first sentence, and Mark is already laughing about that.
You can laugh. You can laugh.
We'll let you make your point.
It was a decision made by CFIUS, which is a 9-agency interagency decision that never reached the level of any secretary. It was CFIUS was overseen by the Secretary of Treasury, but was never reached the level of the Secretary of State. It was overseen by the Deputy Secretary level, at the Deputy Secretary
her second
level.
in command.
So, but never reached Secretary Clinton, and it wouldn't. It wouldn't, no matter if this was a Democrat or a Republican administration. Secondly, this is just another attempt by the far right to muddy the waters, to try to distract from the Mueller investigation, which is reaching a very heightened level right now. We've had several indictments come down. We're hearing that maybe Michael Flynn will be indicted. He's talking to some of the most senior aides, longtime senior aides from Trump's campaign. So,
and just to be clear, so far the indictments we've seen have not been a direct connection between the Trump campaign and Russian collusion. They have been
not
people.
Yet.
Yeah, not yet. So just being clear about factually what's out there. All right,
Correct.
now, Mark, I see that you're chomping at the bits on this because, you know, it seems to be we're getting more and more information about this Uranium One deal that, you know, just raises questions about all kinds of people, not necessarily the Clintons, but maybe including them.
Yeah, there's tons of questions. And look, to put this in a bigger perspective, what is disturbing and should be disturbing to both of us, Republican and Democrat and all Americans, is that there was tons and tons of Russian cash sloshing around Washington, D.C., going in the pockets of both Republicans like Paul Manafort and Gates and Democrats like the Podestas, like Bill Clinton and like the Clinton Foundation. And so in the case of Uranium One, Bill Clinton, right after the Russians had announced that they were going to acquire Uranium One, Rosatom, their company, Bill Clinton got $500,000 for a speech in Moscow from a bank that was pushing Uranium One stock. The Clinton Foundation got $145 million in donations from people who were associated with the Uranium One deal. And so that raises a heck of a lot of questions. Why? How many speeches has Bill Clinton given in Moscow for $500,000 since Hillary Clinton lost?
See, again, why are we still talking about the Clintons, though, on this? I mean, she's never running for office again.
Here's why. Because the fact is the Russians were trying to influence our democracy, and they were playing both sides.
Correct.
Okay? I'm not saying none of this absolves the Trump administration, none of the Trump campaign, none of this clears them. It doesn't change the Intelligence Committee's community's findings that they wanted Donald Trump to win. But the Russians, if you read the Intelligence Committee report, they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, like all of us did. And so they were playing both sides. They were feeding cash into Clinton associates and then cutting deals and putting money in there so they could influence her administration.
You didn't think Donald Trump was going to win? You in the New York Times. I want to read a little bit more because apparently lawmakers are now going to be briefed on this 5,000 plus pages and more about what this informant had to say because they obviously have questions about who was involved. And a source that The Hill talked to says, this is the informant, will he be able to prove that we knew Russia was engaged in criminal conduct before uranium was approved? You bet. Were the Russians using political influence and pulling political levers to try to win stuff from the U.S. government? You bet. So, Adrienne, this has been going on for a long time, and it's probably not over yet.
Well, look, again, we don't know what is in these 5,000 in these pages. The story just came out tonight. We do know that the gag order was lifted on this informant by the Trump administration. So, again, I mean, going back to what and I do want to address something, by the way, that you said earlier about donations to the Clinton Foundation. The stakeholder in Uranium One had sold his share several years before he actually donated to the Clinton Foundation.
That's only one person. It was $145 million.
So there was no relevancy in that.
Multiple people.
But look, again, if Republicans want to use this issue to distract, they can try. But ultimately, this is just another way to try to muddy the waters, to try to shift the focus from the Mueller investigation into potential collusion with the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the election. Versus, what actually happened.
So far, people on both sides of the aisle say they have not seen concrete evidence of that. It doesn't mean it's not coming. We don't know. The investigation continues. But no one on either side of the aisle has said that's been proven.
But here's the difference between what the two of us are saying. Is Adrienne is saying we should investigate the Trump campaign, and I'm saying we should investigate the Trump campaign and the Clintons. Because what I'm saying is that as Americans, there was Russian cash going to Democrats and Republicans. That is an established fact.
But Russia wanted Trump to win.
But they thought that Clinton was going to win. And so they were playing both sides. They were smart. The Russians are smart.
They were not trying to alter the election our favor.
I didn't say that. You're missing my point. I said that they wanted Trump to win, but they expected Hillary Clinton to win, and so they were preparing for that eventuality. As Americans, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, we need to have the full picture of Russia's influence operations in the United States, and that includes both the Democrats and the Clinton operation, which had deep ties to Russia, and the Trump.
You guys are going to be BFFs after this. Look at that.
We already
agreed. You are. We secretly already are.
Green room.
But you all agree, and I think that all Americans agree that that is the commonality that we all have to be concerned about. So, Mark and Adrienne, good to see you both tonight.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, freed from the clutches of tyranny. Would the UCLA players have been so fortunate under the Obama administration? Well, we'll debate that next. Taking office, President Trump has made it a priority to bring home Americans being held as political prisoners throughout the world. Most recently, as we just heard, he assisted in the release of 3 UCLA basketball players from jail where they were being held in China. His administration's also secured the release of 4 other Americans, including, as you may recall, the U.S. student Otto Warmbier, who came back from North Korea basically in a vegetative state and died a short while later. Last summer, his father said the Obama administration should have done more to get his son home sooner.
The question is, do I think the past administration could have done more? I think the results speak for themselves.
Joining me now to discuss, Charlie Hertz of the Washington Times and Sarah Westwood with the Washington Examiner. Good to have you both with us.
Good to be with you.
On this. Okay, so listen, let's start with this back and forth the last few days with the president. These 3 young men admitted that they did some things they should not have done in China. The president happened to be there and brought them, he says, was able to get them home. Now, this is a quote from LeVar Ball, who is one of the players' fathers. He said this: "What was he over there for? Don't tell me nothing. Everybody wants to make it seem like he helped me out." Sarah, it doesn't sound like he wants to give any credit to the president, and maybe this is not his favorite politician, but, it's gotten a little testy.
It's kind of irrefutable that President Trump was the one who took this directly to President Xi Jinping. He happened to be in China at the same time as this incident with the UCLA basketball players. That's pretty fortuitous for them. But it is a two-way street. President Trump did elevate this criticism by responding to it. I think most people actually probably would never have heard that quote if President Trump hadn't decided to fight back. So, both people are kind of at fault for making this an issue that we're talking about right now.
Well, so here's one of the president's tweets, and he's had more than one, but he says, "Now that the 3 basketball players are out of China and saved from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LeAngelo, was unaccepting of what I did for his son, and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in jail." Exclamation point, Charlie.
Yeah, this is vintage Trump. It's what he did. And you're right. Most presidents, of course, wouldn't elevate the criticism, but that's not Donald Trump. And I think it's terrific because, I sympathize with kids doing stupid things. But my goodness, when you listen to that dad take something like this and politicize it, it could have ended very, very badly for his son. And then to politicize it and make it into that, it actually made me stop and realize that, oh, wow, well, now we know where the kid learned the kind of ethics to wind up being a shoplifter and embarrassing the country overseas. Again, a point I never would have brought up had the father not said that. But this is what Donald Trump does, and he likes to make his principled points by picking on people that maybe don't deserve the credit via tweet. And for one, I love it when he does it.
Oh, okay. We'll put you down in that column. Meanwhile, on a much more serious note, having this conversation, this administration does seem to be going after these folks who are stuck in foreign governments and many hostile places in a different way than the Obama administration did. They felt like behind-the-scenes diplomacy and other means were the best way to keep someone from getting hurt and getting them home. And yet we've heard other families speak up, the Warmbiers and others say, we were told to be quiet. We were told to leave it alone. There were families that talked about ransom issues and that they were threatened that they were going to be prosecuted under the Obama administration if they tried to reach out and save their loved ones. It's just a different way of seeing this issue.
Exactly. Critics would say that the Obama administration was maybe more concerned with the broader diplomatic picture and not necessarily with the people who are held in captivity, whereas the Trump administration made extracting people maybe its top priority. I don't think that the Trump administration has really gotten the due credit for getting Otto Warmbier out. That's something that the Obama administration had a year to do and was unable, and it happened pretty quickly after President Trump came into office, relatively speaking. And for whatever reason, there's always one controversy after another distraction, and he never really got the recognition of what a big deal that was.
I mean, for President Obama, this was always kind of small ball, but it's right in Donald Trump's wheelhouse. And in a lot of ways, it's why I think Donald Trump is successful. He kind of operates as a mayor in a lot of ways. He loves a good symbolic victory like this where everybody's happy, everything ends in a happy way.
Not everybody.
No, and sadly, in the case of Otto Warmbier, tragically, but he did do, he did everything that he could. And I think that, that's the secret to Donald Trump's success.
He likes getting directly involved, for sure, in controversies big and small. Good to see you,
whether he should or not.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. All right, coming up, night court. Since when do cops violate safe spaces on campus? Well, they're accused of doing that in New York. Surprise. Time now for night court. We pass no judgment on these stories, but present them to you, the jury, for your consideration. Federal officials just secured the conviction of an illegal immigrant for voter fraud, even though they still don't know his true identity. They're referring to him only as John Doe. The man was convicted in Maryland of voter fraud, passport fraud, and Social Security fraud over the course of 20 years. The illegal immigrant most recently voted in the 2016 presidential election. Advocates on the left still downplay the idea that these cases exist and are as widespread as alleged by the president and others. Students at Brooklyn College say the NYPD creates an unsafe space for them. We don't feel comfortable around cops, says the author of a petition. So now the New York police officers cannot cross the quad when they need to visit the restroom. Instead, they've got to use the dilapidated restrooms at the edge of campus so the students can feel safe. Well, most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you spent the evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.